the papyri logs of the building of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. In 2013, the archaeologist Pierre Tallet discovered an ancient harbor on the coast of the Red Sea. In fact, it was the oldest harbor in the world. Close by, they found many galleries cut into limestone, in which the Egyptians stored their boats. And there they found a large number of papyri texts, documenting the activities of an Egyptian official named Merer and his crew. To their amazement, they found the name of Pharaoh Khufu on the documents, the pharaoh who built the Great Pyramid at Giza in the 26th century BC. And there is more. Reading the text, we find that Merer and his team were responsible for carrying limestone from the quarry at Tura right to the base of the pyramid, where the stones were hauled off his boat. And his team also does work on the artificial lakes and canals that were dug to allow boats to drop off stones at the base of the pyramid. What a marvelous find, an eyewitness account of someone involved in the creation of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And the details of these documents make the story even richer, as you will soon discover. So we have a lot to get to. Let's start. Hey, good to see you. This is Stephan, author of In Search of the Sublime. On this World History channel, we'll trace humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific truth, moral excellence, and enlightenment. We'll meet anyone from Mesopotamian astronomers and Indian yogis to Greek philosophers and Enlightenment scientists. And you'll meet them firsthand using primary sources, giving you valuable insights that transcend the surface-level understanding you get on other channels. Go check it out for yourself. Let's start. The story starts with the discovery of an ancient harbor at a site called Wadi al-Jarf. Here they found an ancient dock, which was L-shaped, with both arms extending roughly 200 meters. And these arms, by the way, were made of limestone pebbles bonded with clay. Close to the shore, two large buildings were found, one with a length of 36 meters and another of 20 meters. And inside of these buildings, the team was overjoyed to discover seal impressions containing both the Horus name and the cartouche belonging to the pharaoh Khufu, who had built the Great Pyramid. And sometimes they even read the words, the horizon of Khufu, which actually refers to his pyramid. And between those two houses, by the way, the team found over 100 anchors, some with ropes still attached to them. Again, showing that we're dealing with a port here. 2 kilometers inland, there was another building, now called the Intermediate Building, with dimensions of 60 by 40 meters. And this was subdivided into various rooms, which were likely used for residential purposes. Another 3 kilometers inland, the team found 31 galleries cut in limestone rock. And to prevent looting, the Egyptians locked these galleries with large limestone blocks, which were placed before the entrance, each weighing several tons. On some of these blocks, the names of various work teams were mentioned. The most common one was called Khufu Brings It, meaning Khufu brings a ship, his 2 uriae, referring to the uraeus, the sacred Egyptian cobra. And inside of a number of galleries, a huge number of jars were found, many also containing the names of the teams for which they were intended. And some team names were both on those stones and on the jars as well. Another common name was the X-Corps team of the uraeus of Khufu is its prow. And this was found on hundreds of jars. And as we will later learn, this was also found on the papyri. And this team will play an important role in our story. The most important use of the galleries was to store equipment when the harbor was not in use. Most important here were the boats, which were deconstructed to fit in the galleries. And in fact, part of these boats were found, together with fragments of wood and rope. And it also seems that these deconstructed boats were placed on small ridges to avoid water damage in case of a flood. More evidence of this interpretation comes from two other harbors on the Red Sea coast, which are of slightly later date. We have Mera Gawassis, which is located to the south, and this also had galleries, and these included stone anchors, rope, wood from boats, and also well-preserved rudders. And this harbor, by the way, was used between 1920 and 1785 BC. And then we have Ain Sukna, which is located up north. This had 10 large galleries, 2 of them still containing a boat, with an estimated length of 14 to 15 meters. We find here that the boat was taken apart, with some pieces roped together, and they were also covered with mats. And nearby these galleries, the archaeologists have also found a large building now known as Com 14. Seal impressions from this site refer to a lot of different kings, starting with Kheper, the son of Khufu, and it goes up all the way to the 13th century BC, more than 1,000 years later. We've also found a few reliefs at this site, and in one of them we read of an expedition of 4,000 men that passed through this port to, quote, to bring back turquoise and copper, and other fine products of the desert. And these two products, by the way, can be found in the Sinai Desert, on the opposite side of the Red Sea. And we also read of an official who was sent to, quote, the mining land of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, named Keperkare, which was an Egyptian word for Sinai. And we also read of a person named the repeller of scorpions, Iti, the son of Isis, whose name is not only found in this harbor, but also at one of the mines in Sinai. And it seems that these same mines were also the destination for the sailors of our main site, Wadi al-Jarf. The copper found in these mines could be used for tools, which were used to cut wood, but even stone blocks. And by the way, copper itself is quite soft, it is too weak to cut stone. But quartz sand can be added to the stone that can do the actual cutting. And in fact, Papyrus K mentions some of these copper tools, referring to copper axes, chisels and picks. And this, by the way, was confirmed since in some cases a mixture of that quartz and also green copper oxide was found mixed together in cuts in the stones. One of the locations at Sinai where copper was mined was Shi Nasb, and here we have found rows of furnaces up to 80 meters long. In total, an estimated 3,000 furnaces were found, with a total length of 1 kilometer. Wind could enter from the sides of these furnaces to raise the temperature to melt the copper ore, while the top was used to add fuel. So this copper was mined and then processed on the spot and then shipped back to the harbor. Now let's turn to the papyri themselves. Inside the galleries of Wadi al-Jarf, hundreds of pieces of papyri were found, most of them very small, but there were also some larger ones, with one over 50 centimeters long. Most impressive are Papyrus A and Papyrus B, who are in an exceptional state given their age. In fact, they are the oldest papyrus texts in the world. Let's start with Papyrus G, which was used to date the documents. It refers to, quote, the year after the 13th census of the large and small cattle of the Horus Medjedu, and this is another one of Khufu's names. Now, how can this be used to date these texts? Well, this census was done every 2 years, which means that the documents were written around the 13 times 2 is 26th or perhaps the 27th year of the reign of Khufu, which was near the end of his reign. Now let's jump to Papyrus A and B. These documents name Merer, a minor official, who was the head of a group of workers called Za. And in these documents, Merer recorded the daily activities of this group during a period of slightly more than a year. And given the amount of bread supplied to this group, the team seems to comprise of roughly 40 workers. On these documents, the month is specified above, and then we see a lot of vertical columns, with above them the day of the month, with the word day depicted with a sun glyph, and underneath we then see the activities of that particular day. And it seemed that they worked in 10-day work weeks, for after each 10 days we see a red line. And if you look through the text, you can easily see the cartouche of Khufu encircled. And this, by the way, was immediately clear when the archaeologists found the papyrus. We see two birds, a snake and a sun, which is one of the names of Khufu. In each column for each day, we read where Merer's group spent the day and then where he spent the night. Let's read a bit. For instance, Day 3 cast off from sailing upriver towards Tura, a quarry used for the pyramid. Spent the night there. Day 4 cast off from Tura. Morning sailed downriver towards the horizon of Khufu, or Akhet Khufu, which refers to the pyramid. Spent the night there. And so it continues, sometimes very repetitively. But although just an administrative document, as you can see, it holds many things of interest to us today. If you read on, you see that the team made various round trips between Tura and the pyramids, going back and forth in just a day or two. And the direction of navigation was always clearly stated. If they go north, they go with the current, and when they go south, the text says that they go backward, that is against the current, and in those cases they use the wind. It is likely that at this point only personnel was shipped from Tura to the pyramids, as no time was allotted for hauling stones off and on the ship, as we see later in the text. And indeed, in the next section, we read that 15 groups, meaning roughly 15 times 40 is 600 men, gathered at a place called Roshi Khufu, or the entrance row to the lake Shi of Khufu, the entrance to the lake of Khufu. This was an artificial lake built to make the pyramid at Giza accessible by boat from the Nile. We read, Day 13, Inspector Merer spends the day with his team carrying out works related to the dike, which is in Roshi Khufu, the entrance to the lake of Khufu, by means of 15 groups of the larger Aper, and the Aper is the larger team. And by the way, there was also a second lake near the pyramids, also named in these texts, called Shi Akhet Khufu, or the Lake of the Horizon of Khufu, that is, the Lake of the Pyramid. And archaeologists, by the way, have since confirmed the existence of these lakes and waterways that were temporarily made to get the stones by boat to the base of the pyramid. Then we read that Merer and his men lift the piles of the dike in the presence of a high official of the priestly class. And this man was likely Ankhaf, who is named by the same priestly title later in the papyrus. And given the date, this lifting of the piles of the dike occurred around the time of the annual flooding of the Nile. So it has been hypothesized that this refers to the opening of a dike to release water into those artificial waterways. Which is quite awesome to have on paper. An eyewitness who worked on those waterways. And now we turn to Papyrus B. Day 25, Inspector Merer spends the day with his team hauling stones in Tura South, one of the quarries. He spends the night at Tura South. Day 26, Inspector Merer casts off with his group from Tura South, loaded with stones, and he sets off to Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, that is the pyramids. And he spends the night at Shi Khufu, the lake of Khufu. Day 27, Merer sets sail from Shi Khufu towards Akhet Khufu, loaded with stone, and he spends the night at Akhet Khufu. Day 28, casts off from Akhet Khufu in the morning, sails upriver towards Tura South. Day 29, Inspector Merer spends the day with his group hauling stones in Tura South, spends the night in Tura South. Day 30, Inspector Merer spends the day with his group hauling stones in Tura South, spends the night in Tura South, and so on. we read that the team went a few times back and forth to both Tura North and Tura South, two quarries where high-quality white limestone was found, that was used for the smooth white outer casing that once covered the pyramids, but that was removed somewhere during the Middle Ages. Quite frankly, it was likely stolen to use in other projects at the time. We also read that Merer took 2 days to make the round trip to Tura North and 3 days to Tura South, which was a bit further upstream. And these trips, by the way, were a day longer than the ones mentioned in Papyrus A, and that is likely because they are now carrying a heavy load, those stones, while in Papyrus A they were just carrying men. As we've just read, Merer usually made a stop at Roshi Khufu, the entrance to the Lake of Khufu, before he set out to the pyramid to deliver the stones. And here we also read of the director of Roshi Khufu, a man who is named Ankhaf in the document. And wonderfully, the archaeologists already knew who this man was, for they had already found his tomb, named G7510 at Giza, at the Easter Cemetery next to the pyramid, close to both the harbor and the pyramid. And by the way, this was one of the largest tombs. In fact, there is only one larger, namely G2000, located in the Western Cemetery. And in this tomb, this man, Ankhaf, is named the king's eldest son, making him likely the son of Sneferu, and also the half-brother of Khufu. His other titles from the tomb include vizier and also overseer of all the king's works. So he was probably the main individual, or one of the main individuals, in charge of the construction of the pyramid. And our man Merer is in direct contact with this man. And here we see a beautiful bust of Ankhaf that was found in his tomb. Then we move to Papyrus C. We read that around the time that the water started to retreat, the team of Merer moved to the Delta region, the marshlands bordering the sea in the north of Egypt. And there they were involved in some type of construction, we're not sure what, near two towns whose names are mentioned in the document and whose location has been identified as well. Then in Papyrus E we read that they went to the port at the Red Sea, at the place where the documents were found. This place is called the Bushy Land, by the way. And in the documents associated with this port, we read of sailing expeditions, likely to the mines of Sinai, and we also read of a place called the Walls of Khufu, which might refer to a fortress which was established by the Egyptians at the Sinai coast, at a site that is now called Tel Ras Budran. And there is even more. In Papyrus D, we even read of Merer's boss, a scribe called Dedi. Papyrus D was written by Dedi, who was probably the overseer of 4 groups or za, of which Merer's group was one, and together these groups formed a team or aper. And mentioned in this text is that aper or group called the Aper of the Uraeus of Khufu is its prow, that we've already mentioned, and that was written on many jars at the port. And that was the name of that large team of which Merer just led a subgroup, and that subgroup of Merer is called Great, and the other groups under Dedi were called Asiatic, Prosperous and Small. And remarkably, archaeologists have also found Dedi's tomb, which is also located very close to the pyramids. And in a stela in this tomb, we read, "The known by the king, Dedi and his wife Debet." And we even see the couple depicted underneath, together with a priest offering incense, and also a servant holding his sandals. In Papyrus D, we read of activities of these 4 groups at what is called the portal, which is the entrance of an institution named Anku Khufu. And this means Khufu lives, as opposed to the horizon of Khufu or the pyramid, which was associated with his death. And near this portal, we read, was also the royal palace of the pharaoh, the royal archives, and also the granary. And all of these places are mentioned in this text. We also read that the groups were tasked to guard duties, to the supply of equipment and food, and also the transport of personnel. And we also read that Merer's group went to worship at the portal. And the text also mentions rewards were handed out to Merer and his men, which included expensive textiles. We read, the Great Merer's team spent the day at Anku Khufu portal. The group Large spent the day at the portal of Anku Khufu, and then giving textiles to Inspector Merer. With the small group on its way, the Great is busy worshipping at this place. And the scribe Dedi goes to the granary to bring back natron, which is a salt used for embalming. Many interesting details in these few sentences. And this portal, by the way, is now thought to be the forecourt of the Valley Temple of Khufu, which has not been found. And this is likely because it is located now under the modern suburbs of Cairo, which have creeped up to the pyramids. And by the way, interestingly, these workmen who carried the stones, who were once assumed to be oppressed slaves, were actually Egyptian elites. The group at one point is actually called Setebza, or the elite group. And on top of this, the entire upper team had a name that included the name of the king, showing it was close to royalty. And the same team was also engaged and worshipping at the king's temple. And on top of all this, they were also rewarded luxury textiles. So these were certainly not oppressed people. And in Papyrus H, we read of the foods delivered to the groups, which included birds and poultry, fish, fruit, bread, cakes, beer, dates and honey. That is, they also had an excellent diet. And this was revealed by the papyri of Merer. In the next lecture, we'll discuss how the blocks of the pyramids were actually transported, how they were moved on water in boats, on sledges on land, and then all the way to the top of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Most remarkable here are the granite blocks above the king's chamber in the pyramid, at a height of about 50 meters, with the largest block weighing an estimated 70 tons. An astonishing feat. But for now, I hope you were inspired by this lecture. And if you want to know more about Egyptian history or any other topic from world history, then read my book, In Search of the Sublime. You can read it completely for free on worldhistorybook.com, or you can buy a physical copy on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.